Hey guys, today I wanted to share with you a book called Boris and the Wrong Shadow because I love cats. I have two of them, and even if you don't have cats, you probably have a shadow, so we can all enjoy this book. Boris has just woken up from his catnap. He smiles as he remembers his dream. Swimming in a gigantic bowl of creamy milk. Now that he is wide awake, Boris is feeling funny. Not funny haha, but funny strange. Boris has a feeling that things aren't quite as they should be. For some reason, Boris appears to have the wrong shadow. He has no idea why, but Boris decides not to let a silly thing like this spoil an otherwise pleasant afternoon. As it turns out, Boris's afternoon is not at all pleasant. The other cats snicker. Little Flossie Fluffball squeaks at him. The beaky birds don't bother to look up from their splashy bath. Boris is starting to wonder if he actually is a mouse after all. He does like the odd nibble of cheese, if that means anything. No, Boris is definitely 100% cat. Fact. Just a cat with a stupid mouse shadow. Boris thinks that if he had any other shadow, perhaps something with a little more wow, everything would be hunky-dory. But it isn't the least bit hunky-dory. No, not in the slightest. However, even gloomy cats need to stretch their legs occasionally. Perfect timing, too, as this is when Boris spies something very interesting indeed. His own shadow. Look at it, skipping past without a care in the world. What nerve! Boris decides to follow. He slinks snoopily under there. He tippy-tappy toes over here, being ever so shushy and quiet as a... What? It's Vernon. Boris asked very politely if Vernon took his shadow. Vernon says, "No, not exactly." Boris thinks that someone is telling a tiny lie. Vernon gulps and says, "While you were snoozing, your shadow got bored and fidgety and wandered off. I found the shadow and it made me feel big and important, like a superstar. I didn't want to leave you without a shadow, Boris, so I gave you mine, a kind of switch swap." Boris would really like the switch swap switched back. Vernon thinks that right now would probably be a good time to scurry home. Uh-oh. Boris's shadow is far too big to fit through the door. Vernon squishes, squeezes, and squashes, but it just won't budge. This might be a slight problem, as Vernon loves his mouse house. He has just finished decorating it. If having this enormous shadow means that he can't putter about at home, then what is the point? You see, it's just not easy being a tiny pink mouse all of the time. Having Boris's marvelous shadow meant that everybody took Vernon seriously for a change. "You couldn't possibly ever understand, Boris," he squeaks oh so quietly. Boris knows exactly how it feels as it happens. It's not nice to be snickered at, squeaked at, and ignored. It made Boris feel terribly small and all alone. Perhaps if they both stopped worrying about silly shadows, they could concentrate on more important things, like having fun together. First things first, to get Vernon out of this pickle, Vernon pushes the shadow until suddenly, ping, toppity tumbly tuggity tump, like a giant rubber band. Phew! Not exactly easy peasy, but the result is spot on. Vernon is loving being footloose and fancy-free again, and has a new spring in his step. This is because being with both his own shadow and Boris means double the fun. Now Vernon feels better than a superstar, more like a super duper star. And to be honest, lugging that big bulky shadow around was a touch tiring. Perhaps a nice cup of tea followed by a little snooze will do the trick. Now, that is what Boris calls a pretty perfect plan. One slurpy sip later, Boris clambers up onto his favorite pillow. This time, his shadow is sleepy too, and sticking like glue, so there will be no prowling around and getting into trouble with a certain mischievous little mouse. The end. Good night.